Trillions of years have passed since the first fires of creation were lit, and the era of the great cosmic dawn has faded into a long, cold twilight. On the ragged outermost rim of the galactic disk, a lone watcher stands upon a world of frozen silicon and iron, a nameless fragment of stone orbiting a dying red dwarf. This sentinel gazes outward, away from the swirling heart of the stellar city, into a darkness so absolute it defies the very concept of sight. There are no distant flickers here, no faint smudges of ancient nebulae, and no whispers of light from 1 billion years ago. The horizon is a wall of nothingness, a void that has been scrubbed clean of every star, every galaxy, and every atom that does not belong to the home shore. The silence here is not merely the absence of sound, but the absence of history. Beyond the rim, the universe has fled. The expansion of the fabric of space and time, once a subtle stretching felt only by the most sensitive of instruments, has long since accelerated into a frantic invisible tide. It has carried every other island of light beyond the reach of any possible journey. The galaxies that once populated the night sky like diamonds strewn upon velvet have crossed the invisible threshold of the cosmic event horizon. They have receded faster than the shimmer of a photon can travel, leaving this observer in a state of enforced solitude that no engine, no matter how powerful, can ever breach. The void before the watcher is not merely an empty room. It is a canvas from which every stroke of colour has been bleached by the relentless expansion of the vacuum. Turning back, the view is a staggering contrast. Behind the sentinel lies the warm amber glow of 100 billion suns. They are huddled together in a desperate gravitational embrace, a single massive island of light in an infinite sea of shadow. This is the Great Merger, the final gathering of the stars of the Milky Way and its neighbours, now a solitary fortress against the encroaching dark. The light of these stars is comforting, a reminder of the eras when the universe was crowded and chaotic, and when a traveller might have hoped to hop from one galaxy to another. But even this glow is a lie of permanence. It is the light of a prison cell, beautifully decorated and vast beyond measure, but locked from the outside by the very laws of physics. The fabric of space itself has become the warden. It does not use iron bars or heavy chains. It uses the geometry of the vacuum. The distance between this solitary galaxy and the next closest point of matter is growing by millions of kilometres every second. Even if a vessel could leap forward at the ultimate speed allowed by the universe, nearly 300,000 kilometres per second, it would find itself like a swimmer struggling against a current that moves with 1,000 times more fury. The swimmer does not move forward. They only watch as the shore they desire recedes into the impossible distance until it vanishes forever. The universe is not just expanding, it is tearing itself apart, isolating every cluster of matter into its own private, eternal tomb. This realization carries a weight that no words can fully describe. To look into the abyss is to understand that the universe has grown cold and silent beyond our reach. The cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of the initial explosion that began all things, has been stretched so thin that it has faded into nothingness. The great stories of other star systems, of alien civilizations that might have risen and fallen in the Great Attractor or the Virgo supercluster, are now permanently lost. Their light will never reach this rim. Their history has been erased by the sheer velocity of space itself. The observer is not just looking at the end of a galaxy, but at the end of the very concept of a connected cosmos. The warden of this prison is a ghost, a force known as dark energy that permeates every cubic centimetre of the void. It is a pressure that pushes outward, a repulsive energy that grows stronger as the gaps between galaxies widen. In the early days of the universe, gravity was the master, pulling matter together to forge the first suns. But as the eons rolled by, the dark energy took its revenge. It began to accelerate the flight of the galaxies, turning a slow drift into a headlong rush toward oblivion. Now, in this far future, the victory of the vacuum is total. The Milky Way is an island, and the ocean surrounding it is growing wider at a rate that exceeds the speed of light itself. This is the fundamental decree of the cosmos. We are born into a reality that seems to promise infinite exploration, yet it hides a cruel limitation within its own structure. We are the inhabitants of a celestial city whose gates have been barred by the expansion of space. Every second that passes, the wall of nothingness grows thicker. Every heartbeat of a star sees more of the universe slip over the edge of the horizon, falling into a realm where time and space no longer connect to our own. The watcher on the rim understands that they are a prisoner of the very vacuum that gave them life. As the red dwarf sun behind the observer flickers with the last of its nuclear fuel, the reality of the great isolation settles in. The beauty of the 100 billion stars is a finite treasure, a dwindling horde of light in a universe that is becoming a graveyard of distance. The epic of the cosmos is not a story of eternal growth, but a story of a closing door. We are witnessing the final glimmer of a fading shore, the moment when the last witnesses of the universe realize that the stars they see are all they will ever have. The journey does not end with a destination, but with the realization that the destination has been taken away from us by the very fabric of the world we inhabit. This is the state of the universe at the end of all things, a single, glowing island of memory surrounded by an infinite, silent and impenetrable wall of night. Long before the dark energy began its final victory, there was a time of profound ignorance that felt like a cozy certainty. For most of the history of the human species, the stars of the Milky Way were not just our home, they were the totality of existence. The night sky was a familiar roof, a ceiling of light where every visible point was assumed to be a neighbour. This celestial intimacy defined the boundaries of the mind, creating a universe that was vast, yet ultimately contained within the familiar spiral arms of our own galactic city. To look at a telescope was to look at the internal anatomy of a single organism, never suspecting that the darkness between the stars held other hearts and other histories. In the year 1920, within the halls of the National Academy of Sciences in Washington, this small reality began to fracture. Two men stood as representatives of two conflicting versions of the cosmos, in what would become known as the Great Debate. Harlow Shapley, a man of soaring ambition, looked at the distribution of globular clusters and saw a Milky Way that was far larger than previously believed, perhaps 300,000 light-years across. To him, this immense structure was the entire universe. He argued that the mysterious spiral nebulae seen through the telescopes of the era were merely clouds of gas and dust, small whirlpools caught within the gravitational net of our own all-encompassing galaxy. He defended a world that was singular and supreme, a solitary jewel in an otherwise empty void. Opposing him was Heber Curtis, who held a more modest view of the Milky Way but a far more expansive view of the vacuum. He proposed that the spiral nebulae were not local clouds at all, but independent galaxies, island universes located at distances so vast they defied contemporary measurement. The intellectual tension in the room was palpable, a clash between the comfort of a central, singular home and the terrifying possibility of an infinite, decentralized sea of stars. If Shapley was right, humanity occupied the center of the only stage in existence. If Curtis was right, we were merely one of countless actors scattered across a stage whose true dimensions were unknown. The debate ended without a clear victor, leaving the scale of reality suspended in a state of scientific limbo. The resolution did not come through rhetoric or philosophy, but through the cold, unyielding eye of a machine. High atop Mount Wilson, under the clear thin air of the California mountains, the 100-inch Hooker telescope stood as the most powerful instrument ever forged by human hands. It was a cathedral of glass and steel designed to peer deeper into the dark than any eye had ever dared. In the early years of that same decade, Edwin Hubble began a systematic survey of the Andromeda Nebula, a faint smudge of light in the constellation of the same name. He was looking for a yardstick, a way to anchor the distance of that smudge to the reality of the Earth. The breakthrough arrived on a cold night in October 1923. On a photographic glass plate, Hubble identified a single star that flickered with a specific rhythmic pulse. It was a Cepheid variable, a type of star whose true brightness is linked directly to the frequency of its pulsations. By measuring the time it took for this star to dim and brighten, Hubble could calculate its absolute luminosity. When he compared this true brightness to how faint the star appeared on his plate, the mathematics revealed a staggering truth. The star, and the entire spiral nebula that contained it, was nearly 1 million light-years away. This distance was far beyond even the most generous estimates of the size of the Milky Way. Hubble famously scrawled the word "Vayar" in red ink across the photographic plate, a mark that signaled the death of the old small universe. In that single moment, the boundaries of reality did not just move, they exploded. The Milky Way was instantly demoted from the totality of existence to a single grain of sand on an infinite beach. The Andromeda Nebula was reborn as the Andromeda Galaxy, a sister world of equal or greater majesty, drifting in a void that was suddenly millions of times larger than anyone had imagined. This was the birth of the modern cosmos, a realization that we were part of a vast, teeming archipelago of galaxies. During those early years of discovery, this revelation did not bring a sense of isolation or dread. Instead, it sparked a fever of scientific optimism. The discovery of millions and eventually hundreds of billions of other galaxies felt like a grand invitation. It was the dawn of a new era of exploration, where the vastness of space was seen as a garden to be mapped and eventually traversed. The discovery of the expanding universe first hinted at by the red-shifting light of these distant galaxies was initially interpreted as a sign of a dynamic, living cosmos. It was a time when the scale of the universe felt like a promise of eternal progress. This was the era that birthed the early dreams of the space age. If humanity could understand the distance to the stars, surely it could eventually build the vessels to cross those distances. The scientists of the mid-20th century looked at the receding galaxies not as fleeing captives but as distant destinations. There was a profound belief that the laws of physics were a ladder we could climb, and that with enough energy and ingenuity, the entire visible universe would one day be within our reach. The tyranny of the light speed limit was seen as a challenge to be overcome, and the treachery of dark energy was a shadow not yet cast upon the human spirit. We were a young species standing on the shore of a vast, newly discovered ocean, feeling the spray of the waves and assuming that we could eventually sail to the very edge of the world. We did not yet know that the ocean was widening faster than we could ever hope to row. The realization that the sea of space was expanding was followed by an even more sobering discovery: the nature of the boat itself and the limits of the water it sails upon. Albert Einstein provided the map that revealed the true nature of our prison, demonstrating that the universe is not a passive, empty stage, but a dynamic and rigid fabric. This four-dimensional manifold, where 3 dimensions of space are fused with 1 dimension of time, possesses a fundamental speed limit that acts as the ultimate warden of our celestial cell. This limit is the speed of light, a constant that defines the very texture of reality. It is exactly 299,792,458 meters per second, a value that is woven into the vacuum itself. To understand why we are trapped, we must first confront the fact that this number is not a mere technical hurdle, to be surpassed by better engineering, but a structural boundary of existence. In the common experience of the planetary surface, the laws of motion seem intuitive and forgiving. If a traveller applies more force to a vehicle, it accelerates. But as one approaches the cosmic speed limit, the universe begins to demand a different price for every increment of velocity. Einstein showed that energy and mass are not distinct entities, but are linked by the square of the speed of light. This relationship, where energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, dictates that, as an object moves faster, its kinetic energy begins to manifest as an increase in its own physical mass. The faster a ship travels, the heavier and more resistant to further acceleration it becomes. This is the iron law of relativistic mass, and it acts as a cosmic brake. A grain of sand accelerated to 99% of the speed of light carries the kinetic energy of a falling mountain and possesses a mass far greater than its resting state. As the velocity creeps closer to the shimmer of a photon, the mass of the object swells toward infinity. To push even a single atom to the absolute speed of light would require an infinite amount of energy, a quantity greater than all the fire in all the stars of all the galaxies combined. The universe itself pushes back against any object that tries to flee its birthplace. The vacuum acts as a thick, viscous medium that resists the acceleration of matter, ensuring that no vessel carrying the hopes of a species can ever reach the ultimate velocity. This resistance is not a flaw in the design of the universe, but a fundamental grain of the tapestry. The speed of light is the speed of causality. It is the rate at which the laws of physics themselves operate. If a signal could travel faster than this limit, the sequence of cause and effect would shatter, allowing an event to happen before its trigger. To protect the logic of reality, the universe anchors every piece of matter to a sublight existence. We are permitted to crawl through the stars, but we are forbidden from ever matching the speed of the light that reveals them to us. This ensures that the vast distances between galaxies, measured in the millions of light years, remain practically impassable. Beyond the physical weight of motion lies the distortion of time, a phenomenon that turns every intergalactic voyage into a one-way trip into the deep future. Space and time are a single unified fabric. As a traveller moves faster through the spatial dimensions, their progress through the temporal dimension must slow to compensate. This is time dilation, a cosmic insurance policy that ensures the traveller can never truly return to the world they left behind. A journey to a distant star system might take only a few years for the crew of a near-light-speed vessel. But back on the home planet, decades or centuries would have flickered past in a heartbeat. The traveller is not just separated by the distance of the void, but by the very flow of existence. This temporal severance means that any attempt to bridge the gaps between the islands of the universe is a form of exile. A civilization that sends out a colony ship to a neighbouring galaxy is not expanding its empire. It is launching a ghost ship into a future it will never see. By the time the vessel arrives at its destination, the culture that birthed it will have evolved, withered, or vanished entirely. The connection between the 2 points is severed by the very act of travel. The universe uses the dilation of time to keep its different regions isolated, preventing the rise of a truly connected cosmic civilization. The speed of light is the unbreakable thread that binds the tapestry together, yet it is also the chain that keeps us tethered to our local neighbourhood. We look out at the light of distant galaxies and see them as they were millions of years ago, a ghostly history transmitted to us across the vacuum. But we can never reach out and touch that history. The universe allows us to be spectators of the infinite, but it denies us the role of participants. We are locked within a bubble of reachable space, a small sphere of influence defined by the distance a beam of light can travel within the lifespan of a star. The immense energy required to move through the vacuum, the infinite mass that accumulates with speed, and the stretching of time all conspire to create a prison without walls. We are shackled by the geometry of the vacuum. The more we try to push against the limits of our cage, the more the universe resists our efforts. This is the tragedy of our cosmic ambitions. We have been given the intelligence to measure the stars and the curiosity to long for them, but we have been placed in a reality where the very laws of physics are designed to keep us apart. The great divides between the galaxies are not just empty space. They are a physical manifestation of a no-entry sign, written in the language of energy and time. In this vast, dark ocean, we are not the masters of the waves, but prisoners of the tide, forever confined to the island that gave us birth. The true betrayal of our cosmic ambitions lies not in the speed of light, but in the very emptiness we seek to cross. For the better part of the 20th century, the scientific consensus held that the expansion of the universe was a fading echo of the initial creation, a momentum that would eventually be reined in by the collective gravitational pull of all the matter in existence. It was assumed that the universe was like a ball thrown into the air, destined to either slow to a halt or eventually fall back in a great collapse. But in the year 1998, 2 independent teams of astronomers, peering into the deep past using the light of dying stars, discovered that the ball was not slowing down. It was accelerating upward, as if driven by an invisible engine of infinite power. The discovery arrived through the meticulous observation of distant white dwarf stars as they reached the critical limit of their mass, and exploded in brilliant flashes known as Type 1 supernovae. Because these explosions always occur with a predictable intrinsic brightness, they serve as cosmic standard candles, allowing researchers to measure the vast distances of the cosmos with unprecedented precision. By comparing the brightness of these explosions to the stretching of their light, the researchers found a staggering discrepancy. The furthest galaxies were much farther away than the current rate of expansion should have allowed. The universe was not coasting, it was being pushed. This revelation shattered the old model of a gravity-dominated cosmos and introduced a new, terrifying protagonist to the story of reality: dark energy. This invisible hand is a ghost in the machine of the vacuum. To understand its power, one must look at space not as a static stage, a cold, empty floor upon which the drama of matter is performed, but as a dynamic medium that is constantly stretching. The geometry of this expansion mirrors the surface of a swelling balloon. If one were to mark 2 dots upon the skin of such a balloon and begin to breathe life into the rubber, the dots would recede from one another. They do not possess engines. They do not possess a will to flee. It is the very fabric between them that is stretching, growing and creating new distance where once there was none. In the cosmos, this stretching is happening in every direction, at every point, all at once. Dark energy is the energy of the vacuum itself. It is a property of space that does not dilute as the universe grows. In a strange and counterintuitive twist of physics, as the volume of the universe increases, the total amount of dark energy increases with it. While matter and radiation become spread thin and lose their influence, the repulsive pressure of the vacuum remains constant. This means that as more space is created, the force driving the expansion grows stronger. It is a self-reinforcing tide, a feedback loop of isolation that ensures the gaps between the great galactic clusters will only grow wider and faster as time marches forward. Before this discovery, gravity was seen as the undisputed master of the large-scale structure of the universe. Gravity is the great gatherer, the force that pulls gas into stars and stars into galaxies. But gravity is a local power, its strength withering over the vast, yawning chasms of intergalactic space. Dark energy, by contrast, is a universal pressure. It dominates the voids, acting as a repulsive force that pushes against the gravitational bonds of the cosmos. In the epic struggle between the two, dark energy has already won. It has seized control of the expansion, turning the gentle drift of the galaxies into a headlong rush toward an unreachable horizon. The realization that the expansion is accelerating changed our understanding of the future from one of potential return to one of certain departure. We are living in a unique window of cosmic history, where the light of other galaxies is still visible, but that window is slowly being painted over by the expansion of the vacuum. The space between our local group of galaxies and the rest of the universe is being manufactured at a rate that will eventually exceed the speed of light itself. This is not a violation of the laws of physics, for the speed limit applies only to objects moving through space, not to the expansion of space itself. The vacuum can stretch as fast as it desires, carrying the distant galaxies away from us into a realm where their light can never return. This repulsive pressure dominates approximately 70% of the energy density of the entire universe. It is the primary constituent of reality, yet it remains completely invisible to our instruments, detectable only by the way it flings the galaxies apart. It is a silent, relentless warden. Every second, it adds millions of kilometers to the distance between us and the furthest reaches of the observable world. It ensures that the vast majority of the universe is not just far away, but is actively escaping. The great archipelago of light that Edwin Hubble discovered is being dismantled by the very fabric of the world. The implications of this accelerating flight are profound. We are not just inhabitants of an island universe, we are inhabitants of an island that is being pushed out to sea. The connections that once bound the cosmos together are being snapped by the invisible hand of the vacuum. The more we learn about the nature of dark energy, the more we realize that our prison has no walls because the distance itself is the barrier. The universe is not a static garden waiting to be explored. It is a scattering of embers in a wind that is growing into a hurricane. We are witnessing the beginning of the Great Isolation, where the repulsive pressure of the vacuum will eventually leave every cluster of galaxies alone in a dark and infinite ocean, forever separated by a void that is growing faster than any light can travel. This limit of connectivity is defined by a boundary known as the cosmic event horizon, a mathematical veil draped across the deep sky that marks the final edge of our physical reality. It is not a solid wall or a shimmering barrier of energy, but a consequence of the geometry of an accelerating universe. At this specific distance from our vantage point, the cumulative expansion of the vacuum reaches a tipping point. Because space is expanding at every point simultaneously, the further away an object is, the more space there is between us to stretch. Eventually, at the distance of the horizon, the speed at which a distant galaxy recedes from us equals the speed of light itself. Beyond that line, the recession velocity surpasses the ultimate speed limit of the universe, creating a realm that is forever severed from our own. The light emitted by a star on the far side of this horizon is a tireless messenger, a ripple in the electromagnetic field racing toward our telescopes at nearly 300,000 kilometers per second. However, as this light traverses the yawning chasms between the clusters, the very ground it travels upon is being manufactured anew by the pressure of dark energy. The situation is identical to a runner on a treadmill that has been set to a speed far beyond any possible endurance. The runner moves forward with every ounce of their strength, yet the belt beneath their feet slides backward with a greater fury. To an observer standing beside the machine, the runner appears to be losing ground, slowly drifting toward the rear of the apparatus until they vanish into the shadows of the room. In the cosmos, this treadmill is the expanding fabric of space-time, and the runner is a beam of light that will never, in all the eons of eternity, reach our eyes. This phenomenon creates a profound paradox in our understanding of the heavens. While the physical universe may be infinite in its extent, the reachable universe is a shrinking sphere. We are like the inhabitants of a grand estate, who wake up every morning to find that the fences have been moved closer to the house, even as the landscape beyond the fences grows larger and more distant. The volume of space that we can ever hope to visit, or even communicate with, is diminishing. This is the tyranny of the horizon. It is a door that is not merely closing, but is being dismantled and carried away into the dark. Every photon that fails to cross the divide is a piece of information lost, a story that will never be told to a human ear. The scale of this loss is staggering and continuous. Every hour that passes on our planetary clocks, a vast swathe of the cosmos crosses this invisible threshold and enters the realm of permanent invisibility. Calculations suggest that approximately 20,000 star systems slip beyond the cosmic event horizon every 60 minutes. These are not small, insignificant sparks. They are entire solar systems, many perhaps harbouring planets with mountains, oceans, and the potential for life. They do not vanish in a flash of fire or a cataclysmic explosion. Instead, they simply fade. Their light is stretched by the expansion of space, shifted into longer and more languid wavelengths, from visible light to infrared, then to microwaves, and finally to long-form radio waves, until their frequency becomes so low that they possess no energy at all. They become ghosts, then they become nothing. This silent exit of the universe is a one-way journey. Once a galaxy has crossed the horizon, no force in the known laws of physics can bring it back. Even if we were to develop engines that could propel a vessel at 99% of the speed of light, we could never catch these fleeing worlds. They are receding from us at a velocity that the fabric of space itself facilitates, a speed that matter cannot match. We are witnessing the dismantling of the sky. The great tapestry of galaxies that was woven together in the aftermath of the initial creation is being unravelled, thread by thread, by the relentless stretching of the vacuum. The psychological weight of this realization is a heavy burden for a species defined by its curiosity. We have spent centuries building more powerful eyes to peer deeper into the void, only to discover that the more we see, the more we realize is escaping us. The very act of looking into the distance is a confrontation with the inevitable. We are observing a universe that is being scrubbed clean of its neighbours. The cosmic event horizon is a reminder that our influence is finite and our reach is restricted. We are permitted to inhabit our local corner of the dark, but the vast majority of the light in the universe is destined to become unreachable, receding into a distance so profound that it effectively ceases to exist. As the eons progress, this horizon will continue to draw closer in terms of the number of objects it encompasses. The distant clusters of the Virgo supercluster, the Great Attractor, and the countless thousands of galaxies in the deep fields of our telescopes are all on a trajectory toward this invisible edge. They are like ships being carried over the lip of a cosmic waterfall. Once they tip over the edge, they are gone from our history. We are left on the shore, watching the horizon grow emptier with every passing moment. The reachable universe is not a static territory, but a dwindling inheritance, a sphere of light that is being slowly extinguished by the expansion of the very space that contains it. This is the great isolation of the future, a sky where the only stars remaining are those that were close enough to be held fast by the gravity of our own home. To step beyond the protective embrace of this galactic home is to enter the most desolate environment in the known cosmos, a realm where the very concept of matter begins to dissolve. The intergalactic medium is a desert of such profound scarcity that the word emptiness feels entirely inadequate to describe the scale of its deprivation. In the staggering expanse that separates the Milky Way from its nearest neighbour, the density of matter falls to a level where a single atom of hydrogen might be the sole inhabitant of an entire cubic metre of space. This is a vacuum so absolute that it makes the space between the planets of our own solar system look like a crowded metropolis. It is a place where the light of 1 trillion suns passes through without ever striking a single obstacle, a silent and unending corridor of nothingness that stretches for millions of light years. For a machine forged by human hands, this environment is not merely a challenge. It is a slow and inevitable death sentence. A vessel attempting to bridge the gap between galaxies must become a self-contained world, a closed loop of matter and energy that can endure for millions of years without a single port of call. There are no asteroids to mine for fuel, no gas clouds to harvest for propellant, and no planets to offer a momentary respite. The ship is an island of complexity in an ocean of entropy. The engineering required to sustain such a craft over the necessary timescales is a nightmare of material science and thermodynamics. Every component, from the massive hull plates to the microscopic transistors in the navigation computers, is subject to the relentless decay of time and the harsh reality of the deep vacuum. The very materials of construction begin to betray the mission over the eons. Metals stripped of the protective coatings and oxide layers provided by a planetary atmosphere are prone to the phenomenon of cold welding. In the absolute vacuum of the intergalactic void, two pieces of clean metal that touch will spontaneously fuse together, their atoms unable to distinguish one surface from the other. Moving parts, joints, and docking mechanisms that must remain functional for 2 million years can suddenly become a single, immobile mass of solid steel or titanium. To prevent this, every mechanical interface must be shielded or made of exotic materials that resist the siren call of the vacuum, adding layers of weight and complexity to a craft that is already burdened by the laws of inertia. Even more insidious is the slow evaporation of the ship itself through the process of sublimation. In the absence of external pressure, individual molecules on the surface of the hull are slowly lost to the void, vibrating away into the darkness one by one. Over millions of years, the thickest armour can become as thin as parchment, and the structural integrity of the vessel begins to fail. This is not a sudden catastrophe, but a lingering erosion, a gradual thinning of the barrier between the occupants and the absolute zero of the surrounding space. The ship is literally dissolving into the nothingness it seeks to cross, its mass bleeding away into a vacuum that is hungry for even the smallest scrap of matter. The electronic heart of the vessel faces an equally grim fate. The silicon circuits that manage the life support and the guidance systems are under constant bombardment from high-energy cosmic rays. These particles, accelerated to near-light speeds by distant supernova and the ravenous appetites of black holes, can punch through meters of shielding to strike a single transistor. Each impact is a roll of the dice, capable of flipping a bit in the memory or burning a permanent path through a processor. Over centuries, these errors accumulate into a digital rot. The software begins to hallucinate, the sensors lose their calibration, and the very logic of the machine begins to unravel. To survive, the ship must possess a level of redundancy that is almost impossible to achieve, with computers constantly checking and repairing one another in a desperate race against the corruption of the void. The power source for such a journey is perhaps the greatest hurdle of all. Whether driven by the slow decay of radioactive isotopes or the intense fires of a fusion reactor, the energy reserves of the ship are a finite hoard. Every joule of heat that radiates away into the 3 degree above absolute zero cold of the intergalactic medium is a piece of the ship's lifeblood that can never be recovered. The vessel must be a masterpiece of insulation, a thermos of incredible proportions designed to hold on to the warmth of its engines for 1,000 generations. Yet, even with perfect insulation, the laws of thermodynamics are absolute. Heat will eventually leak, fuel will eventually run dry, and the bright vibrating hub of technology will grow cold. This is the tragedy of the intergalactic voyage. The ship is a tiny, failing spark in a cold, infinite ocean. It is a miracle of organization and intent, but it is pitted against a universe that favors disorder and stillness. As it drifts through the millions of light years of the intergalactic desert, the craft becomes a relic of a civilization that may have long since vanished. It is a ghost ship, its hull pitted by the rare but devastating impacts of stray dust motes, its interior a labyrinth of failing systems and silent corridors. The distance is too great, the time is too long, and the vacuum is too empty. The universe does not need to use force to stop us. It only needs to wait for the slow, inevitable grinding of time to turn our greatest achievements back into the dust from which they were forged. In the deep silence between the galaxies, the machine is not a conqueror, but a fugitive, running out of time and light in a place where neither can be found. If the machine is a failing spark, the flesh it carries is a guttering candle, a fragile arrangement of carbon and water that was never intended to endure the raw fury of the cosmos. The human form is a masterpiece of local adaptation, a biological machine refined over 4 billion years to thrive within a very specific and narrow set of parameters. We are the children of a thick nitrogen and oxygen atmosphere, shielded from the sun by a robust planetary magnetic field that deflects the solar wind like an invisible umbrella. To leave this sanctuary and strike out into the intergalactic void is to expose the delicate double helix of deoxyribonucleic acid to a relentless rain of high-energy particles that has been travelling across the vacuum for eons. In the deep silence between the galaxies, the primary threat is not merely the cold or the vacuum, but the isotropic bombardment of galactic cosmic rays, atomic nuclei stripped of their electrons and accelerated to nearly the speed of light by the violent deaths of distant stars. These particles are the ultimate saboteurs of life. Unlike the visible light that warms a planet, these high-velocity protons and heavy ions possess enough kinetic energy to punch through the hull of a ship and pass directly through human tissue. As they transit the body, they act like microscopic bullets, shredding the genetic blueprint within every cell they strike. The double helix of the deoxyribonucleic acid is torn asunder, its chemical bonds snapped by the sheer force of the impact. While the body possesses sophisticated mechanisms to repair its own code, the sheer frequency of these strikes in the intergalactic medium creates a state of mutagenic chaos. The repair systems are overwhelmed, leading to a slow accumulation of errors that manifest as cellular failure, the rapid onset of cancers, and the degradation of the nervous system. We are wetware evolved for the shade of a planetary garden, fundamentally unsuited for the radiation-soaked desert of the deep void. This biological mismatch is a second wall of our prison, one that is perhaps even more difficult to scale than the laws of physics. To protect a human crew for a journey of 2 million years, a vessel would need shielding equivalent to the entire atmosphere of the Earth, a layer of water or lead several meters thick surrounding every living compartment. The mass of such a shield would make the ship nearly impossible to accelerate, even with the most advanced propulsion systems. We are trapped in a paradox where the very protection we need to survive the journey prevents us from ever making it. The flesh remains a tether, anchoring our ambitions to the vicinity of our home star, reminding us that we are part of a specific ecosystem that cannot be easily exported into the infinite night. Even our most durable mechanical ambassadors, the Voyager probes, serve as a sobering testament to our insignificance. Launched in the year 1977, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 were intended to be our first true messengers to the stars beyond our solar system. They carry the golden record, a collection of sounds and images meant to represent the diversity of life and culture on Earth to any intelligence that might find them. Yet, in the grand scale of the intergalactic medium, These probes are nothing more than dust motes in a hurricane of vastness. They have travelled for decades and have only just begun to taste the edge of the interstellar medium, the space between the stars of our own galaxy. To reach the next galaxy, they would have to continue their journey for tens of thousands of generations of human life. Long before they could ever cross the threshold of the Milky Way, their power sources will have decayed into cold lumps of plutonium, their electronics will have been fried by cosmic rays, and the golden record itself will have been pitted and eroded by the rare but relentless impacts of interstellar dust. The psychological weight of such a journey is perhaps the most profound barrier of all. A voyage that lasts longer than the entire history of the human species is a concept that the human mind is not wired to comprehend. We are a species of seasons and decades, our perspectives shaped by the brevity of our lives. A crew launched toward a distant galaxy would be entering a state of existence where the ship is the only world that has ever existed or will ever exist for 1,000 generations. The history of the Earth would fade into the realm of myth, and then into the realm of forgotten dreams. The cultural identity of the travellers would be severed from its roots, drifting into a state of profound alienation. The mind, starved of the sensory richness of a planetary surface, the smell of rain, the shifting colours of a sunset, the complexity of a forest, would begin to buckle under the weight of the eternal unchanging dark. Can a species survive the realization that its journey has no end within the lifetime of its civilization? The distance between galaxies is not just a physical gap, it is a temporal and psychological chasm. To attempt to cross it is to commit to a form of social and biological exile that is absolute. The universe uses the fragility of our flesh and the limitations of our minds to ensure that we remain local. We are a part of a story that is being told in a single room of a vast and ancient library. We can look at the other books on the distant shelves, we can even read their titles by the light of their own burning suns, but we are forbidden from ever taking them down to read. The intergalactic void is a filter, a vast and silent sieve that allows only the light to pass, while the matter and the life it supports are left behind on the shores of their original home. Our destiny is to be observers of the infinite, forever separated from the objects of our curiosity by the very nature of what we are. While the rest of the universe begins its long, accelerating flight toward the horizon, a different and more intimate drama unfolds within our local neighbourhood. The Milky Way is not alone in its corner of the vacuum. It is part of a small gravitationally bound family known as the local group. The most prominent member of this family is the Andromeda Galaxy, a majestic spiral of 1 trillion stars that is currently falling toward us at a velocity of 110 kilometers per second. This is not the flight of expansion, but the pull of attraction. Over the next 4 billion years, the gap between these two titans will close, leading to a gravitational dance that will fundamentally reshape our celestial home. This collision is the final act of unity in a universe that is otherwise tearing itself apart. The approach is a slow-motion spectacle that spans eons. As the two galaxies draw near, the invisible halos of dark matter that surround them begin to overlap, creating a drag that slows their relative motion. This dynamical friction ensures that the two spirals cannot simply pass one another and continue into the void. They are caught in a terminal embrace. The night sky of any world still harbouring life during this era would be transformed. The familiar band of the Milky Way would be joined by the growing glowing disk of Andromeda, eventually becoming a twin river of light that dominates the heavens. Gravity begins to pull at the outer edges of both galaxies, drawing out long, luminous streamers of stars and gas known as tidal tails. These silk-like threads of light reach across the gap, bridge builders made of suns, as the two structures begin to unravel. Despite the word collision, the actual encounter between the two galaxies is a ghostly and silent affair. The space between the stars is so vast that the probability of any two suns actually striking one another is nearly zero. If the stars were the size of ping-pong balls, they would be separated by hundreds of kilometers of empty space. The two galaxies pass through each other like clouds of smoke, their constituent stars slipping through the gaps without a single impact. However, the gas and dust within the galaxies do not share this immunity. The massive clouds of hydrogen that permeate the spiral arms collide with a fury that the stars avoid. These clouds are compressed and shocked by the encounter, triggering a final, frantic burst of star formation. The merged galaxy becomes a nursery of brilliant, short-lived blue suns, lighting up the chaos with the fire of a billion new births. This dance of the spirals lasts for several billion more years, as the two galactic cores orbit one another, drawing closer with every revolution. Eventually, the two supermassive black holes at the centres of the Milky Way and Andromeda will find each other, spiralling inward until they merge in a cataclysmic release of gravitational waves. The distinct spiral structures, the elegant arms and the dust-filled disks, are lost in the turmoil. What emerges from this cosmic union is a single, massive elliptical galaxy. This new entity, often called Milkomeda, is a vast, swarming hive of stars that have been redistributed into a more chaotic spherical arrangement. The gas that once fueled the birth of new stars is either consumed in the initial merger or blown out into the intergalactic void by the radiation of the merging cores. Milkomeda is a mature, stable, and somewhat quiet galaxy, a retirement home for the sons of two former empires. This merger represents the last great gathering of matter in our history. While the local gravity was strong enough to pull the Milky Way and Andromeda together, it is powerless against the dark energy that is currently pushing the rest of the universe away. By the time Milkomeda has fully settled into its elliptical form, every other galactic group beyond our local cluster will have been carried over the cosmic event horizon. The Great Attractor, the Virgo supercluster, and the hundreds of billions of galaxies that once populated the deep fields of our telescopes will have vanished. The merger is not a catastrophe, but a consolidation. It is the closing of the gates, the final fortification of our island before the ocean of space becomes too wide to cross. The birth of Milkomeda marks the end of the era of galactic evolution. From this point forward, our home will grow only through the slow, internal recycling of its own stellar material. There will be no more mergers, no more influxes of fresh gas from the cosmic web, and no more visitors from the distant dark. The universe has completed its work of assembly in our corner of space, and now it begins the work of isolation. We are left with a single, massive sanctuary, a fortress containing more than 1 trillion stars. This is more than enough light to sustain a civilization for trillions of years, yet it is a finite inheritance. The merger is the moment when the local group accepts its fate as a solitary island, turning its back on an increasingly empty and silent cosmos. We have gathered everything we can reach, and now we must learn to live within the boundaries of the one home that remains. The dust of the great merger eventually settles into a state of stagnant majesty. Milkomeda, the massive elliptical fortress of stars, stands as the only visible structure in the entirety of the observable world. Beyond its outermost fringes, the universe has been scrubbed clean. The expansion of space, driven by the relentless pressure of dark energy, has finally carried every other cluster of galaxies, every distant quasar, and every flickering nebula beyond the cosmic event horizon. The light from those distant shores, which once travelled for billions of years to reach the eyes of ancient astronomers, has been stretched into wavelengths so long and so feeble that they no longer possess the energy to be detected by any instrument, no matter how advanced. The ocean of the vacuum has become a wall of perfect, impenetrable blackness, leaving our merged galaxy as a solitary island in a truly empty universe. For a civilization rising on a planet orbiting a late-born star within the heart of Milkomeda, the night sky is a beautiful lie. These future observers look upward and see a rich tapestry of 1 trillion suns, a dense and glowing city of light that spans the heavens from horizon to horizon. But beyond the borders of this stellar city, there is nothing. Their most powerful telescopes, peering into the deepest reaches of the void, return only a hollow and terrifying silence. They see no other galaxies, no evidence of a wider archipelago of matter, and no hint that the universe was ever anything more than the single island they inhabit. To these beings, the universe appears static, eternal, and incredibly small. They are the victims of a cosmic amnesia, a systematic erasure of history conducted by the very geometry of the vacuum. This great erasure is the ultimate victory of dark energy over the human desire for knowledge. In the early eras of the cosmos, the evidence of the beginning of all things was written across the sky in the form of the cosmic microwave background, the fading afterglow of the initial expansion. This light provided a map of the infant universe, a thermal fingerprint of the moment when the first atoms formed. But as the expansion of the vacuum accelerates, this light is stretched further and further. Eventually its wavelength becomes larger than the galaxy itself and finally larger than the observable horizon. The signal vanishes. The scientists of the future will find no trace of this radiation. For them, the birth of the universe is not a scientific fact supported by data, but a discarded myth or an unprovable hypothesis. The loss of the receding galaxies further cements this ignorance. In the 20th century, astronomers could measure the movement of distant star systems and deduce that the universe was expanding. This movement was the key that unlocked the history of the Big Bang. But in the era of Milky-Way, there are no distant star systems left to measure. The only objects in the sky are the stars of the home galaxy, all of which are gravitationally bound and do not participate in the general expansion. Without these external markers, the very concept of an expanding universe becomes impossible to derive. The inhabitants of the future will look at their sky and conclude, with perfect logical consistency based on every piece of evidence available to them, that the universe is a stable, unchanging, and solitary island of stars. This creates a state of profound and enforced loneliness, a solitude so absolute that the inhabitants do not even possess the language to describe what they have lost. They believe they are the only spark of life in a universe that is exactly as large as their own galaxy. The hundreds of billions of other galaxies that once populated the sky have become less than ghosts. They have been deleted from the record of reality. The history of the cosmos has been rewritten by the expansion of space, leaving behind a narrative of singular existence. The psychological weight of this isolation is hidden by the very perfection of the erasure. There is no sense of mourning because there is no memory of the wider world. The universe, in this far future, has become a master of deception. It has provided a home that is vast enough to feel infinite, yet it has hidden the true scale of existence behind a curtain of dark energy. The future civilization may achieve incredible heights of technology and philosophy, yet they will remain forever ignorant of the grand story of the cosmos. They will never know of the great attractor, the cosmic web, or the billions of other civilizations that might have looked at the same stars in the ancient past. They are the residents of a fortress that has become a tomb of information. The stars of Milky-Way will continue to burn for trillions of years, providing a stable and sun-drenched existence for those within. But the horizon will remain empty. The Great Erasure ensures that the final chapter of the universe is one of total isolation. We are moving toward a time when the only way to know the truth of the cosmos will be through ancient records, should any survive the eons. Without such records, the truth is lost to the void. The universe will have successfully hidden its tracks, leaving the last witnesses of existence to believe that they are the beginning and the end of all things, alone in a darkness that stretches forever into the nothingness. The realization of this enforced solitude often brings with it a sense of existential dread, a feeling that we are the inhabitants of a sinking ship in a rising tide of shadow. However, a shift in perspective reveals that this cosmic isolation is not a prison sentence, but a definition of home. The boundary of the Milky Way is not a wall that keeps us in. It is a shore that keeps the infinite at bay. To mourn the loss of the distant galaxies is to overlook the staggering abundance of the one we already inhabit. Within the gravitational embrace of our own galactic disk lie 100 billion suns, each a unique furnace of nuclear fire, casting its light upon a local neighbourhood of such complexity that it could never be exhausted by a single species. If a civilization were to visit one star system every single day, it would take nearly 300 million years to complete a survey of the Milky Way. This span of time is longer than the entire era of the dinosaurs on Earth. To speak of being trapped within such a structure is to misunderstand the scale of our reality. Encircling these 100 billion stars are trillions of planets, a number so vast that it exceeds the total number of breaths taken by every human being who has ever lived. There are rocky worlds with mountains higher than any on our home planet, gas giants with storms that have raged for 1,000,000 years, and icy moons where liquid oceans churn beneath kilometers of frozen crust. The Milky Way is not a cell, it is a boundless frontier, a luminous archipelago of possibilities that could occupy 1,000,000 civilizations for 1,000,000 lifetimes. The inability to cross the intergalactic void is not a failure of the human spirit, or a lack of technological prowess. It is a fundamental property of the scale on which we exist. Just as a forest is defined by its borders, and a mountain by its peak, our place in the cosmos is defined by the limits of our reach. These limits provide a framework for meaning. Without boundaries, the universe is a formless and overwhelming void. With them, it becomes a territory, a place where history can be made and where a legacy can be built. The Great Isolation is the universe's way of ensuring that every galaxy is a unique experiment in the evolution of matter and mind, protected from the homogenization of the infinite by the vastness of the vacuum. The richness of this local neighborhood is staggering. At the heart of our galaxy lies Sagittarius, a star, a supermassive black hole with the mass of 4,000,000 suns. This gravitational anchor is the pivot around which the entire galaxy turns, a dark sun that warps the very fabric of space and time into a swirling vortex. Surrounding this center are the ancient globular clusters, dense swarms of hundreds of thousands of stars that have burned since the dawn of the universe. In the spiral arms, we find the great nurseries of creation, such as the Orion Nebula, where vast pillars of gas and dust are collapsing under their own weight to forge the stars of the future. These are not merely distant lights. They are the internal organs of the organism we call home. To look at a black hole or a nebula is to see the cycle of life and death on a cosmic scale. Every atom of iron in our blood and every atom of calcium in our bones was forged in the hearts of stars within this very galaxy. We are not visitors to the Milky Way. We are the galaxy itself made conscious. Our bodies are composed of the recycled remnants of ancient suns that lived and died long before the Earth was formed. This biological and material connection means that we can never truly be isolated as long as we remain within the structure that birthed us. The galaxy is a closed system, a self-sustaining cycle of birth, death, and rebirth that has functioned for 13 billion years and will continue for trillions more. The despair of the cosmic event horizon is a product of our desire for conquest, a remnant of an era when we believed that to know a thing was to own it. But the universe does not belong to us. We are participants in a story that is far older and far larger than our ambitions. The fact that we can never reach the Andromeda Galaxy or the Virgo supercluster does not diminish the value of our existence. It reinforces the importance of the ground we stand upon. We are the stewards of this one island. The trillions of planets within our reach are not a consolation prize. They are a staggering inheritance that we have only begun to understand. This realization brings a profound sense of clarity. Our destiny is not to flee the Milky Way in a desperate attempt to outrun the expansion of space. Our destiny is to flourish within it. We are the witnesses of a specific corner of the dark, the chroniclers of a specific set of stars. The beauty of the universe lies in its unreachable horizons, which remind us that there will always be more to see than we can ever touch. By accepting the limits of our prison, we transform it into a sanctuary. We find that the 100 billion stars are more than enough to satisfy our curiosity, and that the trillions of planets are more than enough to house our dreams. The Great Isolation is not an end, but a beginning. The moment when we stop looking at the door and start looking at the room, realizing at last that we are already exactly where we need to be. The sentinel on the rim of the world turns their back to the void once more. The abyss remains an absolute, unyielding wall of nothingness, yet the terror of that emptiness has been replaced by a quiet, enduring peace. The observer looks inward, toward the sprawling amber heart of Milkomeda. This massive elliptical city of light, the result of an ancient dance between the Milky Way and Andromeda, is a testament to the endurance of matter and gravity. 1 trillion stars burn within this sanctuary, a number that defies the capacity of any single mind to count. These suns provide warmth, light, and the raw materials for 1,000,000 civilizations to rise, flourish, and dream. The observer understands that to be confined to this one island is not a tragedy, but a profound and beautiful necessity. The path to this understanding was long and marked by the shedding of ancient illusions. There was a time in the early dawn of the space age when the species believed that the entire universe was a garden waiting to be harvested. In those years of youthful optimism, the discovery of other galaxies felt like a promise of infinite expansion. The scientists of the 20th century looked at the stars and saw stepping stones to the edge of the cosmos. They assumed that the laws of physics were merely puzzles to be solved, and that with enough energy and will, the great divides could be bridged. They did not yet see the wardens standing in the shadows, the iron laws of Albert Einstein, and the relentless pressure of the vacuum. The journey toward sobriety began with the realization of the cosmic speed limit. The 300,000 kilometers per second that light travels became the ultimate boundary, a speed that no piece of matter could ever match without becoming infinitely heavy. Then came the revelation of 1998, when the ghost of dark energy was finally identified. The discovery that the universe was not just expanding, but accelerating changed everything. The galaxies we once hoped to visit were not just distant, they were fleeing. The cosmic event horizon drew its invisible line across the sky, and one by one the distant fires were extinguished. The great erasure began, scrubbing the history of the universe from the night sky, until only the local group remained. Yet, in this far future, the observer sees that this isolation has produced a clarity that the ancient world lacked. The beauty of the universe lies precisely in its unreachable horizons. If every star were within our grasp, the cosmos would be a small and mundane place, a territory to be mapped and commodified. Instead, the universe remains vast and mysterious, a story so grand that it does not require our presence to be meaningful. The distances that keep us apart are the very things that give the universe its scale. They remind us that we are small, but they also remind us that we are rare. We are the witnesses of the light, the eyes through which the galaxy looks back at itself. Our destiny was never to be the masters of the entire cosmos. We were never meant to conquer the billions of galaxies that have now vanished into the dark. Such an ambition was a product of our own frailty, a desire to fill the emptiness within ourselves by owning the emptiness without. Our true role is far more humble and far more significant. We are the inhabitants of a single island of light, a sanctuary that has been preserved against the encroaching night. Within the boundaries of Milkomeda, we have everything we need to live out the eons. The 100 billion suns are our hearth, and the trillions of planets are our fields. The observer watches as a new star ignites in a distant nebula, a tiny spark of hydrogen and gravity beginning its multi-billion-year journey. Even now, trillions of years after the first light, the galaxy continues to create. It is a self-contained miracle, a fortress of complexity in a universe that is otherwise surrendering to entropy. The isolation of our home is the very thing that has saved it. By being cut off from the rest of the cosmos, we have been spared the dilution of the infinite. We are concentrated, focused, and alive. The sentinel closes their eyes for a moment, feeling the faint rhythmic pulse of the galactic heart. When they open them, the abyss is still there, but it no longer feels like a threat. It is merely the frame that holds the masterpiece. The dark is the canvas, and Milkomeda is the paint. As the red dwarf sun behind them flickers, a reminder of the inevitable passage of time, the observer feels a sense of gratitude. They have been permitted to stand on the shore of existence and look out at the waves. They have been allowed to be part of a story that spans the entirety of time. The galaxy stands as a solitary bastion in an eternal night. It is a glowing jewel suspended in a void that has grown cold and silent. While the rest of the universe has fled into the unreachable distance, this one island remains, a sanctuary of light and memory. The stars of Milkomeda will burn for a long time yet, a defiance of the dark that will last for trillions of years. This is our home, not a prison, but a fortress, not a cell, but a sanctuary. We are the children of the island, and as the great silence deepens around us, we find that the light we have is more than enough to see by. The journey does not end in a destination, but in the realization that we have always been home, and that the beauty of the stars is most profound when they are the only things left in the night.